Welcome and good morning. I am not Reverend Linda Hoddy. I'm Pam Collins, a member of this congregation again. Unfortunately, Linda was called away this morning. She was here and ready to present her part of the service, and she got a call from her husband that he was having heart pain. And so she has an hour between her here and home. So she ran home to be with him. Hopefully everything will be okay. I think it might be appropriate to take maybe a moment of silence for whatever you do to send healing energy to people you care about. So just a moment of silence, please. We are grateful that you have joined us this morning. Your presence brings us joy. I will be being both Reverend Hoddy and myself. I'll try to make it very clear what are her words and what are mine, especially since we are on opposite sides of the issue we are going to share with you today. That'll be a little challenging, but we can do it. So let me read her beautiful welcome to you. We send blessings to all our co-congregants who are traveling today in order to view the total eclipse of the sun tomorrow. We wish you illuminating, if not transcendent, experiences and traveling mercies. May you all return safely. We are a non-creedal faith and seek to be a multicultural community of people from all walks of life, all ages, all gender orientations and preferences, all socioeconomic levels, all skin tones, all abilities, and faith vocabularies. We aspire to welcoming all people. As a non-creedal faith, we have many beliefs among us. Today's service focuses on the use of religious language in services, classes, and small groups. Some of us believe in God, some of us don't. Some identify as humanist, some as Christian, some as Jewish, some as Buddhist, probably other identities that I don't know about. And some of us don't give a hoot about religious identity or consider ourselves garden variety UUs. We do not have to have a religious identity of any sort to fully participate here, to belong. Today, we explore the relationship between language and spirituality. Do we have language to experience or express spirituality? Are there words that are off limits? Why or why not? Words that can be sung but not spoken in services? Why or why not? Can we listen open-heartedly and open-mindedly to those whose beliefs are different than our own? How do we create a safe space where we may explore and share even those who believe differently? We also touch on other ways beyond words that spirituality can be expressed. So then she introduces me, but I've already done that. Please join with me in a call to community, which is in your hymnal, number 439. We will read it responsively. We gather in reverence before the wonder of life, the wonder of being together, so close yet so apart. Each listening, each trying to speak, we gather in reverence before all intangible things that eyes see not, nor ears can detect. And now, please join with me in the words in your order of service for lighting the chalice. Welcoming all free seekers of truth and meaning, we gather to excite the human spirit, to inspire its growth and development, to respond morally and ethically to a troubled world, and to sustain a vital and nurturing religious community. So we're about to watch a video by Dr. Lisa Miller about spirituality and neuroscience. I know this is unusual to share our time in the pulpit with a video, but we watched this and we thought it was quite valuable. It's only about 9 minutes long, as an introduction to the words that we are going to share with you after that. So enjoy the video.
What if I told you that we have the antidote to the greatest epidemic of our time, suicide in young adults? The rate of death by suicide now rivals the rate of death by auto accident in young adults. And basic science, clear as a bell, shows us that we are 4/5 less likely to take our lives when we have a strong spiritual life that is shared. There's nothing in the clinical or social sciences as profoundly protective against suicide. Together with my colleagues at Columbia Medical School, when we looked at structural MRI, when we looked at the architecture of the brain through MRIs, what we see is in people with a sustained spiritual life, broad and pervasive regions of cortical thickness represented in red. These are regions of perception, reflection, and orientation. With 80% overlap, these regions are not thick, but thin in people with recurrent major depression. Normally in an MRI study, you see an article published with there's a little tiny speck of difference. These are huge regions of the brain to show effectively greater processing power, a thicker cortex. The cortical thickness across the regions of the spiritual brain decreased the level of symptomology of depression 1 year out, a year from now. That is very strong evidence that indeed spiritual life is neuroprotective against depression. The Army gets the same slice of American pie as does higher ed or entry-level jobs, 18 through 25-year-olds. It's one story. It's our American story, and it's the epidemic of suicide. And so the Army decided to take a data-driven approach and support the spiritual core of every soldier. And in 1 year, we are already seeing a 28% decreased rate of suicide. Can higher ed do that? Yeah. Of course higher education can do that. Can all of our institutions to receive young adults transform to support the spiritual core? Can we move from narrowly transactional relationships with young adults to ones that are loving, that are far more generative, that are transformational? People's personal spiritual life can be formed many ways. Some people say it is through prayer, meditation. Others say in nature. Nature is my cathedral. That's where I realize. And in fact, we have a great deal of science that says nature actually entrains the brain. Walking through nature does very much what prayer might do. It awakens our natural spiritual awareness. People realize their spiritual nature through many paths, one of which is religion. For about 2/3 of people, they say, I am spiritual and I am religious. And then for about 1/3 of people, they say, I am a profoundly spiritual person, but I am not religious. Both are good, and both tap the same neural correlates. There's much Strom and Dross. I am Catholic, I am Jewish, I am Muslim. Well, actually, we're all using the same spiritual neural correlates. So I often hear people say, am I a spiritual person, or how do you define spirituality? And everyone is welcome to define it and know it and feel it exactly as they want. And it is also the case that just as we are born with 2 eyes, 2 ears, and a nose, we are born spiritual beings with a natural seat, a neuro seat of transcendent awareness. We are born, every one of us, with an innate capacity for spiritual awareness. There's one spiritual brain, and we all have it. When we realize our nature, when we build, if you will, and strengthen the spiritual core of who we really are, then our lives unfold in an entirely different way. Life is healthier, life is far more full of resilience, life looks different, it's far more of an adventure, an expedition. And when we boil down and look right at the data, where hundreds of peer-reviewed articles say beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's nothing as profoundly protective against the diseases of despair, the epidemic of our time, as a strong spiritual core. Over the past 25 years as a scientist and as a clinical psychologist, it's become crystal clear to me that suffering is an invitation for a deepening of spiritual life. We have to say yes to it. Spirituality is not a life hack. Spirituality is a deep reorientation in our lives through which we see into the truer, more foundational nature of reality. There are always two realities, and they both matter. We are a point and we are a wave. We are magnificently distinct with GPS coordinates all over the globe and exquisitely diverse zipped up bio bodysuits, and at the very same time, we are part of one human heart, one field of life, a oneness, a unit of reality, one field of consciousness, loving, sacred consciousness. And we are built to be able to toggle between these two realities. Every one of us is built to be able to perceive that we are exquisitely unique and we are part of one great sea of life. We are way oversold on the idea that we can control life. And we are really almost indoctrinated into an illusion that achieving awareness alone can be enough to handle the challenges of life. We must be able to look at life in a bigger way, in a deeper way. And that is our awakened awareness. Awakened awareness is when we shift and we say, what is life showing me now? What is being revealed here? It's a stance of deep curiosity, total observation. Observation of the eyes, yes, but also of the heart. But whatever our language, we are no longer controlling life. We are in a dynamic conversation of life. I think that in K-12, I was taught to have the wrong conversation. I was taught to go after what I want and get it, and give it every bit of strength I could so that I could win the day. And that's a helpful skill, but it's completely insufficient to live a meaningful, full life. So we need to teach children, and really maybe as adults, we need to help revisit this and teach ourselves to have a different conversation with life, to go from saying, what do I want and how am I going to get it, to the deeper, more fundamental question of what is life showing me now and what is life showing us now. So we need both achieving awareness and awakened awareness. And when the two go hand in hand, our life becomes a magnificent adventure. It becomes a quest. We're constantly part of the symphony, helping each other realize the grander opus. In this gift of life, we are loved, we are held, we are guided, and we are never alone. And not only that, we are given the ultimate opportunity to show up for one another so that we might be loving and holding and guiding and never leave anyone alone. That's the spiritual path.
It's probably what I should have titled my piece here. Some years ago, driving through Washington Park, I happened to be following a truck with a bumper sticker that read, "Love God, not His creation." I've been upset about that ever since. Love God, not His creation. Those words were a real wake-up call for me, a stunning realization that casually using the word God was not the innocent activity I assumed it was. I was raised a liberal Protestant Christian, and God, right? But those words changed my mind. The G word could have dire consequences, a glimpse of which I hope to share with you today. So, having watched the video, it's always comforting when science confirms something we've suspected all along. In Dr. Miller's work, we see an example of science confirming what some people have already suspected, that a sense of something bigger than us seems to be necessary to give our lives meaning and help us get through the hard times. I might note here that psychotherapist Carl Jung made that same observation nearly 100 years ago, but lacked the kind of scientific support Miller's work enjoys. For many people, as we learned in the video, that bigger thing is admittedly religion. But let us take note, it doesn't have to be. Religion is just one path toward an awakened spiritual awareness. Nor does being religious guarantee a spiritual disposition. In fact, as Martin Hagelin reminds us, who's a professor of composition and literature and humanities at Yale, reminds us that most religious doctrines are focused not on this physical life, but on what they promise comes after it. Hence, love God, not his creation. Spirituality, on the other hand, is best defined as awareness of the transcendent, that which is bigger than and beyond us, but of which, and this is important, we are an integral and natural part. Spiritual awareness is an openness to all that is, human and otherwise, here and now. It's a seeing into the deeper nature of reality and an understanding of intuitive, connective consciousness. In short, it is what we all long for here in this life, and that is a sense of deep connection with all that is. It's not hard to see how this kind of perspective is, as Dr. Miller says, a protection against the feelings of disconnection that fuel depression, anxiety, and suicide. Many of you didn't need to see this video to know that we are facing a crisis of psychological distress among our young people. But what Dr. Miller has underlined for me is this. There are increasing numbers of people, especially younger people, who have rejected traditional formal religion, but have not found a much-needed spiritual alternative. I'm a trained spiritual director, and the people I work with, all of them, are in that place. They don't have an affinity for the traditional religions, but they want something, and not sure exactly what it is. But missed it. In the dualism of the ongoing battle between religion and science, I almost feel that there's a design in separating us from the concept of spirituality without religion. So in that dualism between religion and science, religion has historically claimed spirituality as its exclusive territory. And religion has been, I keep losing my place, I'm sorry. Until recently, science has been very happy to let spirituality stay with the religious. But more recently, as we see from the video, this is beginning to change. Traditionally, spirituality without religion has been, if not out and out denied, then denigrated, dismissed, relegated to woo-woo New Age kookiness, or even the stuff of witchcraft, which leaves millions of people without the psychic support so necessary for a full and mentally healthy life. Dr. Miller's work makes it clear that it's high time to change that, to bring spirituality free of religion into the mainstream. This isn't easy work, but the first step, I believe, is to look at the ubiquitousness of biblical language. When I first joined this church at the turn of this century, that sounds crazy, I remember the humanists in the congregation, some of whom are still here today, balking at God language. I came among you thoroughly unchurched. I didn't believe in heaven or hell or prayer. And since the onset of heartbreak and adult suffering, found my solace not in a church, but on the shores of Lake Ontario or anywhere where 2 or more trees were gathered. Nevertheless, at that time, when I first joined you all, I tended to feel that and I apologize for this, that the humanists were being a bit picky in making such a fuss about God language. I was among those UUs who, in the spirit of liberalism, thought I could just sing the word God, but in my mind substitute spirit or mystery. I've since learned that it's not that easy, nor is that approach effective in evoking a different worldview. Words matter, and they have deep and stubborn roots. I could make that point right here quite painfully by speaking some words from this pulpit that would make you cringe and perhaps get me dragged out of here. Even if I were to protest as you dragged me from the hall, that's not what I meant by that. I would not be forgiven. Your intellectual and visceral reaction to the words could not be erased. Your heart would still be beating hard, your face flushed, your discomfort aroused. Such is the power of words and the meanings we give them. Naturalist Chet Ramo agrees with Richard Dawkins, who makes the argument that, quote, to use the G word as a stand-in for inscape or mystery is to lend credence to an idolatrous anthropomorphism, end quote. Similarly, author Sam Harris argues that, quote, we desperately need a public discourse that encourages critical thinking and intellectual honesty, end quote. I now recognize that saying God when we mean something else is anything but intellectually honest. I will say, though, if you mean God, use God. It's just if you don't, use something else. God language pervades our social discourse, even where people claim to be unreligious. It's on our money, our national pledge, our songs, and our movies. It's everywhere. Is it any wonder that those people who subscribe to Christian triumphalism think they have a case? The constitutional promise of religious freedom is outgunned by our money, our courts, and our national identity. Sam Harris writes forcefully about the support liberal Christians, that's us, I think, some of us, give the right by continuing to use the Bible as an authority, even though they're cherry-picking it. The words of the late poet and feminist Audre Lorde put it even more plainly when she warned, the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. And I would submit to you that there is no single word among the master's tools more persistently used in service to oppression, justification of violence, resistance to change, and alternative ways of understanding the universe and our place in it than the word God. Celtic scholar Caitlin Matthews says, our whole consciousness of what life is, of how we live it, and how we ethically deal with it is the next challenge that will increase the boundaries of our understanding. Sam Harris agrees. He writes, another problem with religious moderation is that it represents precisely the sort of thinking that will prevent irrational and non-denominational spirituality from ever emerging in the world. Whatever is true about us spiritually and ethically must be discoverable now, end quote. I share Harris's sense of urgency. Obviously, it only takes a minute looking at the news to know that we have to change direction. The conservative elements in this country know as well as anyone that a shift in consciousness is essential, and that terrifies them. So they attempt to deny it. But that doesn't make it any less real. One can deny climate change, gender fluidity, changing demographics, whatever, but that does not change reality. The liberationist theologian Father John Sobrino says, spirituality is looking at reality honestly. Those of us who are doing our best to bring ourselves into harmony with a broader unitive consciousness have already let go of some words that have kept our minds caged. Can we not do the same with the G word? I know it's a big lift, but the reward is worth it. As Dr. Miller is fond of quoting, an awakened heart is the seat of unity with all life. As we learned in the video, we are born with a neural seat of transcendent awareness. Our brains are wired for it. Indeed, they literally eat it up. Who wouldn't want that nice, thick, receptive cortex that she pointed out in the video? So how do we move forward with this work? There are plenty of places to go to develop a God-based spirituality in community. But where does one go to do the same for non-theistic spiritual experience? To engage that open discourse in our spiritual and ethic potential that Harris calls for. I'm looking at you, people. Years ago, when I participated in developing a strategic plan for this church, Tom Chulak asked us to consider a signature role for Albany UU. What was special about us that we could offer humanity? I don't believe we came up with one at that time, except to keep doing the things that we were doing right. But I'm suggesting one to you now. What if we put ourselves on the map by leaning into a genuine and robust exploration of a non-religious transcendent awareness? Beyond religion, beyond humanism, opening up to the wider field of consciousness of which we are a part. Such an exploration, I claim, would include the concerns of the humanists, the sensibilities of the earth spirits, the perspective of scientists. As we learned in the video, the awakening science of neurobiology is finding resonance with psychology and spirituality. This is cutting-edge stuff and deserves to take up space in our discourse for the sake of our planet, our youth, and the joyful life we all long for. Let me end with this thought. Many of us have spent some precious time angsting over God issues. I know I have. But now I know that was perhaps not the best use of my time and my psychic well-being, as it is a question that cannot be answered. Nor does it matter to the rotation of the planets. We will have an eclipse tomorrow, whether it is God's will or just how the planets move. And none of us can change it. In contrast to the love God, not his creation ideology, I prefer Mary Oliver's words, who said, "I am sensual in order to be spiritual." So I suggest this. Let us wallow in the joy of this beautiful creation, however it is that it got here, and know that we are a part of it. Let our hearts fill with gratitude and our spirits commit to a disposition of caring and compassion. I believe this would be a sufficient prayer to whatever creative force lurks just beyond our present knowing. And let our speech be, as Caitlin Matthews suggests, the music that enchants and inspires. And now, let us go into a time of meditation. Our words for meditation come from Nancy Schaefer. I have been looking for the words that come before words, the ones older than silence, the ones not mine, that can't be found by thought, the ones that hold the beginning of the world and are never used up, which arrive loned and make me weep. Let us go into a time of silence. And yes, I realize that I went out of order. Probably good to give you a little break between one reflection and the other. And now for Linda Hoddy's reflection, which is somewhat different. She says, don't throw it out, reframe it. I want you to know that Linda and I talked about this some, but we did not read each other's reflection. So these two reflections were written not in response to the other one. So I'm Linda. Perhaps because it was because I had seen Lisa Miller's video, but when I looked through the comments of the youth group's listening circle about their desires for Albany UU, they mentioned 3 times wanting AUU to be a safe place. Being a safe place can mean many things. When I ask what is a safe place, it's a place where I can share all of myself, where I can be real, and share my doubts and fears as well as my faith, and my failures as well as my triumphs, my sorrows as well as my joys. And I can share those things, I can be vulnerable, knowing that I will be received in love rather than judged or have to endure put-downs or unkind comments. But it isn't just youth who need this, is it? We all need it. We all need a safe place to explore and discuss our spiritual lives without censure, unless there is harm in being created in the way we do it. If we are awake, we will probably change our spiritual ideas, our spiritual orientation over our lifetimes. We can expect to grow spiritually, and we need ways to talk about it. For this reason, I believe that we should not restrict what words may be used in our community. If we make some words off limits, whether in worship or small groups or discussions in classes or in the songs we sing, we do our congregants a disservice. I worry that we truncate spiritual life if we restrict the language in which people may describe and discuss their spiritual experience. In a sense, we do violence to that tender, vulnerable core when we outlaw specific language. It's not like being told, oh, you shouldn't feel that. We need to feel what we feel, whether in emotional or spiritual life. Can we really make that distinction? So that's my first reason for not restricting religious language. It is more inclusive to allow and encourage people to speak as they feel compelled. At the same time, I know that words are inadequate for the expression of spirituality. And that's why we have music and symbol and ritual and gesture and silence, as well as words. The world, the universe is so vast that our language is incapable of capturing it. All religions began with someone's mystical experience, and the words that we use to try to express those experiences, words like shalom, oneness, God even, are only pallid alphabetic souvenirs, those words from Frederick Bruckner. So that pesky word God, Pam wants to jettison it because she doesn't like its frame. We all think in frames, we can't help it. The linguist George Lakoff made this concept famous in his book, Don't Think of an Elephant. Well, now that you've heard the word, you can't not think of an elephant. That is, if you've ever seen one, or at least seen a picture of one. Even if someone describes one for you, if you've never seen one, you'll not be able to fully understand what the word elephant is. You have no frame for it. I, Linda, have become comfortable with the word God because over my lifetime, I have reframed it. I no longer think of God as Yahweh of the Hebrew Bible or Zeus or Jesus of the Christian scripture. For me, the word God evokes the feeling of a presence I experience when I sit down in my bay window overlooking the river and watch the sun making its way down the opposite riverbank and the light shining through leaves and dancing with the water of the river. It always spurs me to think about my own life being like a raindrop that enters the river. I love Rumi's line of poetry. For the raindrop, joy is in entering the river. Someday I will die, and my raindrop of life will enter the river. God, for me, is that huge process of all the atoms flying around, dancing in space. The fields of energy colliding, bringing matter into being, and then dispersing again. I am part of that great dance. I will not always be in this individual form, but for now, zipped up in this body bag, I am privileged to witness and experience and participate in this dance from this time, in this point in time and space. Present seems to be the synonym for the moment of the word God. People often use it to indicate that spiritual feeling of connection, whether to other people or to the larger universe. And the International Organization of Spiritual Directors uses it as the name of their journal, Presence. I experience God as a presence. I will never know for sure whether this is something conjured up by my mind or something that comes through my mind. I am sure, because the neuroscientists tell me, that it is coming through the neural seat of spirituality. They tell me that my brain is wired to symbolize in its attempts to make sense of and create a world of meaning. When my son was about 10 and I was attending divinity school in Boston, I was asked to participate in his religious education class at the Schenectady UU Church. It was to be what I sometimes now think of as stump the minister. Put the minister in a room with 10 children and let them ask anything they want. The first question I was asked was, do you pray? At that time, that was one of our taboo words. The RE directly promptly said, no, I do not pray. But as I thought about it, I thought, well, sort of. And I said, I think prayer is like tuning my violin. If I don't tune the instrument, I can't make music with it. If I don't pray in the morning, offering gratitude for all the good things in my life, sometimes asking for help from the Great Spirit, I have a much harder time making it through my day. So morning prayer for me is like tuning my violin. I tune myself. I intentionally open myself to those larger forces of life, to the beauty around me. I ask with Lisa Miller, what is life offering me today? What is it asking of me? And then my life runs much smoother, much more like music than cacophony, or like lurching from one activity to another. So being open to one another's language helps us to create a community where we feel safe, where we belong, where we feel beloved. It's not that we have to agree on our language. It's permissive, not prohibitive. It's a way of showing love for one another, receiving one another open-heartedly, open-mindedly. But it is also important beyond our walls. One of the greatest tasks to which Unitarian Universalism is being called is to help create the new story of humanity, the new myth of why we are here, and how we create meaning and purpose for our lives. The old stories are important for knowing where we have come from, so we don't want to completely throw them out. Yet we know that literally, factually, they are mostly not borne out by the science of today. So what do we do? Can we look at the stories as myths that give our lives meaning? That helps. It's kind of like saying there are different kinds of truth. It's admitting that we need more than one kind of truth, more than one kind of thinking. But in order to create those new myths and stories, which, by the way, the science fiction writers are working very hard on, we need to be in dialogue with other religions. In order to do that, we have to understand their frames. And to understand their frames, we have to delve into their language and try to understand what they mean by all those words. Wittgenstein told us that languages are like games. They have rules by which you must structure your language. And he said that religious language uses different rules. It's a specialized language game. So before you reject the concepts from another religion, you have to try to understand what they are saying. George Tiger is a UU Army chaplain, and he tells the story of interacting with a soldier in Afghanistan. Tiger is trying to explain to the Afghani soldier what a chaplain is. The Afghani soldier isn't getting it. But then his face lights up and he says, "Hey, Army Mullah." "Chaplain," says Tiger, has little meaning to him. Mullah, on the other hand, is something he knows and understands. Together with Army, we have a term that means something to both of us. In other words, Tiger and the soldier found a frame that allowed them to understand one another. We need to work at being religiously multilingual, because every conversation where we can carry on a meaningful conversation, build mutual understanding, and forge lasting relationships across religious difference is an opportunity to move the world towards peace. So if we want to be inclusive within AUU, if we want to be hospitable within AUU, if we want this to be a place to explore our spirituality and allow it to change and grow as we age, we need to be open to varying religious language and concepts. It's also enriching. If we want to help write that new story, which I think is one of our greatest callings, we'll need to understand where others are coming from, understand their frames for words like God, prayer, salvation, confession, shalom, namaste, and even risk having our own frames enlarged. I love the namaste with which we can open and close our yoga classes. Namaste means something like, "The divine in me greets the divine in you," or "The divine in me honors the divine in you." That open, receptive, illuminating attitude is how I want to interact with you. It is how I want to interact with the larger world. Namaste. Shalom. May we greet each other and hold each other in that spirit. Randy Rosette, thank you for. Now that your blood is moving. All right, we have a benediction in here somewhere. All right, get serious again. Allah, Yahweh, Isis, Krishna, Buddha, Nirvana. O thou who art nameless, lift us above the names that divide to the nameless one, wherein we live and move and have our being, our humanity under the sun, one in the eternal quest of reality, truth, and love. Amen. And now we will extinguish our chalice. Please join with me in the words in your order of service for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Linda and I were planning on having a little talk back after the service that we were both really looking forward to, because we really want to hear what your feelings are on the topic we shared today. While I am very anxious to hear those things, I don't think it's fair to do it without Linda here to, speak her side. So, maybe somewhere, somehow, we can have that talk. I think this is a topic that we can talk about more as time goes on. So, and let's hold Linda and her husband in our hearts today.